Life often presents us with moments of profound uncertainty, where paths diverge and the future seems shrouded in doubt. Even when we stumble, making what appear to be poor decisions or mistakes, a deeper, unseen hand is at work. Through hardship and suffering, what seems like an ending can often be the beginning of an unexpected transformation. This is the mystery of Gam Zu Latova, that everything, even perceived misfortune, ultimately serves.
Let me begin with a question that seems simple, yet is profoundly unsettling. When life's events unfold in an almost perfect sequence, are we witnessing coincidences or the work of an ever-watchful eye? Parashat Vayigash forces us to confront this question without evasion. It is not a comfortable narrative. It is a story where human drama, free will, moral failings, and painful silences coexist with an unsettling feeling. Someone is directing the script from behind the curtain. It is also a parashah that compels us to reflect on our actions. For example, the patriarch Jacob favored Joseph because he was the firstborn of Rachel, the woman he loved most among his wives. That is why Joseph had more knowledge than his brothers, because Jacob spent more time with him, and that is why he gave him a special tunic. All of us who are parents know the mistake of making distinctions between our children, something that divides them, that creates conflict between them. Similarly, Joseph boasted to his brothers about his knowledge and his spiritual gift of interpreting dreams, and this created envy among his brothers. And so each one generated negative reactions due to their bad attitudes. But what I want to emphasize is that despite these negative actions, the outcome was good. All of this served to save the entire family. However, there was a very high price to pay: suffering. The text that accompanies us, from Genesis 44:18 to 47:27, does not explicitly speak of visible miracles. There are no seas parting or voices descending from heaven yet. And precisely for this reason, this parashah is a masterclass on Hashgajah, divine providence. The word Hashgajah comes from a Hebrew root that means to observe attentively, to watch with intention. It is not a passive gaze. In biblical and rabbinic language, God not only sees what happens, he accompanies, directs, and manages reality with purpose. Like an orchestra conductor who doesn't play every instrument, but knows exactly when each note should be played. Two essential dimensions emerge here. The first is Hashgajah pratit, particular providence. God is present in the details, in a seemingly minor decision, in a chance encounter, in a word spoken at the right time. It does not negate free will, it integrates it. Human decisions remain human, but they are not devoid of meaning. The second is Hashgajah klalit, collective providence. Historical processes, famines, migrations, exiles, and rescues are not directionless chaos. They are broad, sometimes painful movements through which national destinies are woven. Vaigash teaches us that the individual and the collective do not compete, they are intertwined. And when one learns to read history through this lens, life ceases to be a succession of accidents and begins to reveal itself as a path observed, accompanied, and, although not always understood, profoundly guided. This is Abel Flores speaking, and I am very grateful that you are here at the Mishna TV studying with us. Don't go away, because this class will open your spiritual eyes so that you can see the simanim, the signs, in your life and understand that God, the one and only true God, is in control of your life, your decisions, and your past. Let us pause for a moment and observe the scene with attentive eyes, almost as if we were looking at an ancient manuscript, one of those that are not merely read, but contemplated. Parashat Vaigash reaches its point of greatest tension when Judah steps forward. He does not shout, he does not threaten, he does not negotiate. He assumes responsibility. And in that silent gesture, history changes course. Here, divine providence becomes visible without the need for miracles. Providence does not appear as a bolt of lightning from the sky, but as a moral process that has matured sufficiently to sustain the future of an entire family. Judah speaks, but it is not mere rhetoric. It is the precise moment when human character attains the stature that history was waiting for. In terms of Hashgajah pratit, individual providence, the contrast is striking. The same Judah who years earlier proposed selling Joseph into slavery now offers himself as a slave for Benjamin. This is no coincidence. It is repentance in action. God does not negate his freedom. He guides it from within. He molds the conscience, awakens empathy, transforms guilt into responsibility. In the final verses of chapter 44, Judah does not save his brother with cunning, but with commitment. But Vaigash does not stop at the personal level. Here, Hashgajah klalit, collective providence, bursts forth. This intimate, almost domestic act projects historical consequences. Judah's moral leadership anticipates the destiny of his lineage. The future centrality of Judah will not be born of power or the sword, but of the capacity to bear the burdens of others. That is why this parashah teaches us something radical. Collective redemption begins when someone decides not to flee from their responsibility. Divine providence does not push history from the outside. It writes it from within, when the human being is finally willing to step forward. And we arrive, almost without realizing it, at the most delicate moment in the entire story. Not the most dramatic, but the most dangerous. Because revealing a truth too soon can be destructive, and doing so too late can render it useless. That is why the Torah emphasizes something essential. Joseph's revelation occurs precisely when it should, not before, not after. Chapter 45 of Genesis does not describe an uncontrolled emotional outburst. It describes perfect timing. Joseph does not reveal himself because he can no longer bear it. He reveals himself because the moral process has reached its opportune moment. Divine providence here does not act as an external intervention, but as a precise choreography between human character and history. From the perspective of Hashgajah pratit, particular providence, the detail is crucial. Joseph does not reveal himself while his brothers are still the same men who sold him. He waits, he observes, he listens, and only when he perceives a real change, when Judah offers himself in place of Benjamin, when responsibility replaces denial, does he speak. The truth emerges when it can heal. God, so to speak, administers the timing of truth with surgical mercy. The opening verses of chapter 45 show us a Joseph who cries, yes, but who controls the moment. The revelation is neither revenge nor catharsis. It is medicine. And that is one of the deepest lessons of individual providence. Not every truth should be told as soon as it is known. It should be told when the other person can receive it without being broken. But the story does not remain solely in the realm of the intimate. Here, Hashgajah klalit, collective providence, unfolds. That private, almost familial moment unlocks the survival of all of Israel. The reconciliation opens the way to Egypt, to settlement, to demographic growth, and paradoxically, to the future Exodus. A domestic event becomes a hinge of universal history. That is why Joseph can say, without cynicism and without naivete, God sent me ahead of you. Providence does not erase the pain of the past, but it gives it new meaning. And when the time is right, the revelation does not destroy identities. It redeems them. And now we enter the theological heart of Vaigash, the point where the text ceases to be mere narrative and becomes a biblical theory of purposeful suffering. Here, Joseph utters words that are neither easy to say nor easy to hear. It was not you who sent me here, but God. Let us pause for a moment. Joseph does not deny the evil. He does not erase the betrayal. He does not minimize the sale. He does not spiritualize the crime. But he does something even more audacious. He refuses to grant evil the last word. In Genesis 45:5, Joseph formulates a providential reading of his own life story. Betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment were not chaotic accidents, but a guided path toward the preservation of life. This is Hashgajah pratit in its most mature form. Individual providence does not mean a life without pain, but a life whose pain can be reinterpreted. Joseph looks back and does not say everything was fine. He says something deeper. Everything made sense. God sent me ahead of you, not behind, ahead, to prepare the future before you even knew you would need it. But Vayigash does not remain confined to personal psychology. Here, Hashgajah Klalit, collective providence, bursts forth. The famine is not a domestic problem. It is a regional crisis. It affects economies, causes migrations, and threatens entire civilizations. And God positions Joseph not only as a survivor, but as an administrator. Individual suffering becomes a tool for the survival of many. The Torah had already shown us the extent of the famine, over the face of all the earth. Now we understand why Joseph had to be exactly where he was, not for his personal glory, but to sustain entire peoples. Providence on a macro scale, economy, politics, migration, life. And here emerges an uncomfortable but liberating teaching. Divine providence does not cancel human responsibility, but neither is it trapped by it. Evil exists, injustice wounds, but even above human action, there is a direction that is not lost. Vaigash teaches us that meaning is not always revealed at the moment of pain. Sometimes it only appears when the story has fully unfolded. And then, like Joseph, one can look at their past without denying it, and without remaining a prisoner of it. And so we arrive at a point that is often overlooked, but which is crucial. Providence not only saves bodies, it saves relationships. In the Torah, life doesn't mean merely food on the table. It means inner peace, restored relationships, a family that can once again look each other in the eyes without fear. In Genesis 45:9-15, Joseph does not act as a judge pronouncing sentence, but as a healer who knows that the soul also needs care. He weeps, he embraces, he speaks to his brothers' hearts, he comforts them, and none of this is automatic. It is not emotional weakness, it is inner strength. It is self-control, compassion, and discernment placed at the service of reconciliation. Here, Hashgajah pratit, individual providence, manifests itself in a very subtle way. God does not force Joseph to forgive. He empowers him. He grants him the emotional clarity to use his power not for revenge, but as a bridge. Weeping at the right moment, embracing without reproach, comforting without humiliating. This too is divine grace, because forgiving well requires more strength than punishing. But once again, the story doesn't remain private. From the perspective of Hashgajah Klalit, collective providence, the message is powerful. Without reconciliation between brothers, Israel does not exist as a historical entity. There may be biological descendants, but no national destiny. Tribal unity is not a mere ethical detail. It is a necessary condition for the future of the people. Public providence here consists not only in ensuring physical survival in Egypt, but in preserving foundational unity. A people divided from its origins cannot carry a historical mission. That is why the Torah devotes so much time to this reunion. It is not sentimentality, it is national architecture. And then an eternal principle resonates, formulated centuries later in Psalm 133. Behold, How good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. This is not naive poetry. It is applied theology. Vaigash teaches us that providence culminates when history not only moves forward, but also heals. When the past stops bleeding. When a reconciled family can, at last, become a people with a future. And with this, we arrive at a movement that seems geographical, but is profoundly theological. Jacob descends to Egypt. He is not merely an old man reuniting with his lost son. It is the conscious beginning of a long foretold historical stage. A descent that paradoxically contains within it the promise of a future ascent. The Torah shows us that this step is not taken lightly. Before crossing borders, Jacob stops. He offers a sacrifice, and in the night, when the external noise subsides, God speaks to him. In Genesis 46:3, a decisive phrase resonates: "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt." Providence begins by addressing fear. God does not ignore Jacob's personal anguish. He names it and guides it. Here, Hashgajah pratit, individual providence, is manifested. God not only directs historical processes, he accompanies the intimate trembling of the human being who does not know what awaits him. He promises his presence: "I will go down with you," and also a return: "I will surely bring you up again." Biblical faith does not demand blind courage, but rather accompanied trust. Fear is not denied, it is contained. But immediately the text broadens the perspective. "There I will make you into a great nation." This is not a family decision. It is a strategic migration within the divine plan. Hashgajah klalit, collective providence, enters the scene with all its force. Israel enters Egypt as a large, vulnerable, dependent family. Centuries later, they will emerge as a structured, self-aware people, bearers of a mission. Here, what was announced to Abraham generations before is fulfilled. Exile, oppression, and finally, redemption. Not as arbitrary punishment, but as a formative process. Egypt is not a mistake along the way. It is a necessary stage in the construction of national identity. Vaigash teaches us that not every descent is a fall. Sometimes it is a deep planting. Public providence operates through movements that, seen from within, seem dangerous. But, seen from the perspective of the promise, they are precise. And perhaps this is the most unsettling lesson. God doesn't always save us from the difficult path. Sometimes he guides us directly to it, because there, and only there, can a nation be born. During this short break in the middle of the class, we want to let you know that if you would like to make a donation, you can do so by scanning the QR code you see on the screen, or by clicking the link below in the description. I personally thank you very much for your contribution. Now, finally, the story leads us to a moment of almost unbearable tenderness. After decades of absence, of unresolved grief, and unanswered questions, Jacob and Joseph are reunited. There are no long speeches. There are no theological explanations. There are tears. And sometimes that is the deepest form of providence. The Torah describes the scene with poignant precision. Joseph prepares his chariot, presents himself before his father, and weeps at length on his neck. In Genesis 46:29, we are not told that the pain disappeared. We are told that it was contained within an embrace. Providence here does not erase the past. It enfolds it with mercy. This is Hashgajah pratit, individual providence in its most human expression. Individual providence does not mean that we never lose what we love, but that what is lost can sometimes be restored. The father sees his son again, not as he was, but as he is now. And Jacob can say, "Now I can die." Not out of resignation, but out of fulfillment. Life has once again come full circle, imbued with meaning. But once again, the intimate sustains something much larger. From the perspective of Hashgajah Klalit, collective providence, this reunion guarantees historical continuity. Jacob is not just a father, he is the bearer of the covenant. That he arrives in Egypt alive is not merely an emotional detail, but a theological necessity. The promise must cross the border with him. God had already said, "I will go down with you, and I will surely bring you up again." Jacob's presence in Egypt ensures that the subsequent growth of the people is not only biological, but also spiritual and covenantal. The future Israel is not born of chance, but of a promise fulfilled. Vaigash teaches us that providence culminates not in the absence of pain, but in its transfiguration. The journey was long, unjust, and heartbreaking, but in the end, God does not restore lost time. He restores something deeper, the possibility of embracing again without denying the cost of getting there. And so, almost without fanfare, providence takes an unexpected form: intelligent planning. The settlement of Israel in Goshen is not an administrative detail or a footnote to the narrative. It is a strategic, delicate, and profoundly theological move. For not every miracle manifests itself by breaking natural laws. Some operate by organizing space. Goshen is the place where survival does not require dilution. There, one can live, grow, and multiply without disappearing. The Torah teaches us that providence also considers geography, economics, and culture. Not only immediate salvation, but also long-term identity. From the perspective of Hashgajah Pratit, individual providence, the text shows us Joseph carefully instructing his brothers before presenting them to Pharaoh. What to say, how to say it, how to define themselves. In Genesis 46, 33, 34, Joseph does not act as an improvising politician, but as a guardian of his family's future. God uses his practical wisdom to protect the living space of his people. Sometimes, providence is expressed as good advice given at the right time. But once again, the personal action supports something greater. From the perspective of Hashgajah Klalit, collective providence, Goshen fulfills a decisive function. It is fertile land, suitable for livestock, and at the same time, culturally separate. The Egyptians despise shepherds. What might seem like a disadvantage becomes protection. Social distance prevents total assimilation. Here, public providence does not consist of integration, but of strategic separation. Israel can grow numerically without dissolving culturally. It can multiply without losing its uniqueness. Identity is preserved not through absolute isolation, but through clear boundaries. Vaigash reveals an uncomfortable truth for the modern world. Not all coexistence strengthens identity, and not all separation is hostility. Sometimes, God cares for a people by granting them their own space, where they can develop without losing their voice. Goshen is not an accidental refuge. It is the historical womb where a family is transformed, slowly, into a nation. And the narrative culminates with an image we rarely associate with the sacred, that of an administrator in the midst of an economic crisis. Yet the Torah has no qualms about showing us that divine providence also operates in offices, granaries, taxes, and state decisions. Joseph is not merely an inspired dreamer. He is a statesman. In Genesis 47, the famine reaches its most severe point. There is no bread, no private reserves, no margin for error. And it is here that the Torah presents Joseph as a divine instrument in economic policy. Social order during scarcity is not accidental. It is part of God's oversight of societies, not only of pious individuals. From the perspective of Hashgajah Pratit, individual providence, we observe something fundamental. Joseph's personal life, his gifts, his wisdom, his patience cultivated through years of injustice, becomes a tool of salvation. His talent does not appear as a genetic accident or as an isolated merit. We had already been told the Spirit of God is in him. Administrative ability here is a providential calling. Joseph manages resources, centralizes grain, exchanges food for money, livestock, and finally land. He does not act out of cruelty or improvisation, but to sustain life under extreme conditions. Particular providence manifests itself when an individual is placed exactly where their abilities can serve many. But the text goes further. In Hashgajah klalit, collective providence, Joseph establishes a national economic system. He restructures property, production, and taxation. The famous fifth for Pharaoh is not just a fiscal measure. It is a model of state survival. God governs macroeconomic processes here, using a human being as a conscious mediator. This makes those who prefer a spirituality without structures uncomfortable. But the Torah insists. God reigns not only in the temple, but also in the marketplace. Faith does not suspend the economy, it guides it. Vayigash teaches us that providence reaches its maturity when human talent aligns with social responsibility, when personal wisdom ceases to seek individual success and becomes a source of collective support. And perhaps this is the ultimate lesson. In times of crisis, God doesn't always send bread from heaven. Sometimes he sends a person capable of organizing its distribution. We've reached the conclusion, and now we can look at the entire Parashat Vayigash through a single, clear, and discerning lens. The lens of divine providence, Hashgajah. When we use this lens, the text ceases to be a collection of emotional episodes and becomes an architecture of meaning. The first principle is crucial. God directs history without negating human freedom. The brothers make a wrong choice when they sell Joseph. Joseph makes the right choice when he forgives. And God does not erase any of these decisions. He integrates them. As Joseph himself will later say, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." There is no fatalism, but neither is there chaos. There is direction. The second principle is that the individual and the collective are intertwined. Judah's repentance, a profoundly personal act, opens the historical destiny of Israel. Without that interchange, there is no revelation of Joseph. And without that revelation, there is no orderly descent into Egypt, nor the formation of a nation. Individual providence, Hashgajah pratit, prepares the ground for collective providence, Hashgajah klalit. Third, providence is recognized more clearly in retrospect. While Joseph is in the pit, in Potiphar's house, or in prison, there are no explanations, only pain. The meaning appears later, when the present allows us to reinterpret the past. God sent me ahead of you, Joseph says in Genesis 45. Biblical faith does not demand understanding everything in the moment. It demands faithfulness, even when things are not yet understood. And finally, Vayigash teaches us something profoundly countercultural. Providence includes ethics, not just miracles. Here, the sea is not parted. Here, character is built. There is forgiveness instead of revenge, strategy instead of improvisation, responsible administration instead of empty mysticism. God acts through well-made moral decisions. Reading Vayigash through the lens of Hashgajah is learning to read our own lives as well. Not everything will be clear now. But not everything is accidental. If this approach has helped you see the Torah with greater depth, I invite you to join us. Like, follow us, visit our virtual home at lamishna.com, and continue this journey of learning with us. We have more videos and a free Mishna course waiting for you. Because studying isn't just about knowing more, it's about learning to see better. continue watching this video that we recommend.